You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 75. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers.
In episode 74, we began a conversation about integrity, choosing courage over comfort. In this episode, we'll explore another aspect of integrity. Integrity is willing to do what is right over what is fun, fast, and easy. I can already tell you, Sarah, I don't like that. That willing to do what's right over what's fun, fast, and easy. Let me tell you, this episode is brought to you by Dare to Lead, a workshop based on the research of Brené Brown to help you learn the skills you need to be a brave leader and create a courageous culture. You can let us know you're interested by clicking on the button on the show notes page, transformingmission.org/075.
So, Tim already indicated that, we don't like choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, and easy, especially in an age of instant gratification and everything is now an Amazon, bring me my stuff yesterday. So let me ask you this question to get us started. Have you ever come to the point where you said to yourself, or maybe to a friend or to your spouse, I can't keep doing this? Or maybe you cut corners to get something done. It was the fast route, but perhaps not the right route. You might have tried to do that even driving somewhere. There's a traffic jam and you seek to cut through somewhere and, it doesn't end up being the fast route after all. So here's an interesting example, and it comes from the world of medicine. Do you know why most errors happen in hospitals? It's because someone wasn't willing to speak up about something that they saw was wrong. And they don't speak up because they recognize it would take too much time and would keep them away from a patient that they should be caring for. It might stir up some sort of trouble with another colleague or having to confront a coworker, or it might just be hard. Now take that to where you live, where you work, and even where you play. What's something that you don't talk about, you don't bring up? What's an action you don't want to take because it might get messy quickly? You know it's the right thing, but it might take way too much time, too many resources, or it just feels too hard. In the church, Tim, you and I have experienced examples of this. So what's an example from the church that you may have seen that might get at this idea of we choose what's fun, fast, and easy instead of choosing what is right?
Well, I've experienced this several times around conversations. We don't have the conversation with a volunteer who's let's try this one, who's making the female volunteers feel uncomfortable because he's related to the board chair somehow. Conversations are really tough to have sometimes. They're the right thing to do, but it's not what we do.
Because of the relational web, it gets messy.
Yes.
There's someone who is in leadership and may have, quote unquote, perceived power, would get entangled in that, and it causes us to ask the question, what will they think if I have this conversation? And it might call our leadership into question. That's what we think. I'm not saying that it does. If we take that action.
That's the story we tell ourselves.
That's the story that we tell ourselves. Another one might be we don't have a conversation with a teenager that we see and notice that their behavior that there's signs of risky behavior going on. Because in our mind, we think, well, what if I'm wrong? And what if nothing risky is going on? And I don't want to plant seeds where there isn't something happening. And so the story I tell myself is, I could be wrong, so I'm not going to say anything instead of asking the question.
And it also goes down that path of, I really don't want to strain the relationship I have with their parents, or
right,
because I need them. We don't say it this way, but it's maybe I'm confessing here. I don't want them to be upset with me or not like me, so I'm not going to create something that I'm not really sure about.
Or who am I to question their child's behavior? I'm not their parent. Oh, wait, I'm not even a parent. What are they going to think of me when I ask a question? And again, folks, there's a way to have that conversation with care and not pointing fingers and blaming people that they're not parenting well. That's not what the conversation's about. But that's the story that we tell ourselves, and so we don't do what is right.
Another example, Sarah, comes around. A big one in the church that I've discovered is a question that comes around money. We don't ask questions about the amount of giving for this month, and why we seem to be short on cash. And it's not always because people aren't giving. There may be other reasons, but we just don't raise the question.
And you're meddling on that one, because I distinctly remember my first years in ministry seeing every week the giving for the church that I was serving, and hearing at the end of the month that we were having trouble paying the mortgage, and the numbers didn't add up. And at that point, I didn't speak up, but I kept scratching my head. This doesn't make sense to me. And come to find out, lo and behold, a year later, we had an administrator who was embezzling money. That's why the numbers didn't add up. I didn't have any proof of that. That's why I didn't ask. But there were doubts being raised in my mind of this is not making sense. So are there other examples? And I'm half joking saying this. Easier examples, maybe? Oh, wait, we're having a conversation about integrity. And we started with courage over comfort. And that doesn't get separated and stay in a little silo. That moves with us into choosing what is right over what's fun, fast, and easy. So we've just given a few scenarios of invitations to live into your integrity by choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, and easy. And hear me, I feel like I need to make a disclaimer here. We're not saying that fun is bad. What we're saying there is that sometimes we choose what is fun instead of doing the hard thing that will take us to a new place and help us be the leader that we need to be. Should we give our listeners one more example?
Well, we've been having this conversation, so what happens if we don't?
Well, if we don't, we're not naming the elephant in the room.
And, okay, before we name the elephant, what happens if we do?
So here's what I'm thinking, Tim. Where we are at as a denomination, the question that has been running through my mind is that for everyone at every level and every place in the United Methodist Church, I think we're coming to a place that we're going to have to ask the hard question of, can I stay a part of this organization? Or I'll say it for me, and as a pastor, or do I need to find another way to live out my call to lead God's people? Now, hear me, folks. I'm not there yet, but that question's coming. And And I think that question's coming because the way that we're treating one another, how things have changed and not changed, as well as the unwillingness to have the tough conversations and making decisions based on money and not decisions bathed in prayer.
Well, before we got to this part of talking about doing what's right over what's fun, fast, and easy, you and I were having a conversation about whether we should have this conversation at all, because it's not comfortable to have this conversation.
No, it's not comfortable for me to put out in the world to folks from the district that we're leading. You know, these are the questions that are popping up in my mind.
But these are also the questions popping up in the minds of some of our pastors and people in the churches.
I want to be a part of a church that helps people encounter the love of Jesus. But when people can't encounter people in the church loving one another, and what they encounter is people yelling and screaming at one another and not able to have conversations around deep areas of difference, I wouldn't want to be a part of that. Why would I want to invite somebody else into that?
What I'm hearing you say is that the right thing, the right choice at this point is to be the courageous leader that helps the denomination move in a different direction, asking the question, having the conversation, engaging people at the place of what it means to be Christian in the midst of this, that whether it's fun, the fast, easy way is either to be quiet or to take a side and throw the rocks or blame, or that would be the easy way. And what I'm hearing you say is the more difficult way, the courageous way, which may be the right way, is to call that into question and see where we might take it in a different direction. Am I saying that correctly?
I think you named a part of it. I think it's more specific for me. I think for me, it's about recognizing that the people that I'm surrounded by and the people that I'm invited to lead need the skills to lead in a new way. Need to be given a chance to step into this reality and to do that work together of becoming and being formed as Christian leaders in new ways so that we can lead people towards a new reality. What that means for the institution, I don't know. But the institution's made up of people. And so if the people don't change and if we don't learn something new and learn how to have new conversations, I don't know how the institution can ever change. And what we have tried and what we have been doing isn't working. I'm sorry if there are people that think that it is. I don't think it's working. I don't think it's been working for my entire lifetime. We need to change. And to change, I believe, means learning something new. I'm not trying to change our faith. I'm saying learning something new as a leader. And so I think the bigger question for me in the midst of all of this is, who is God inviting me to be as a leader in this time and place? And how can I help other leaders to step into courage, to be brave, to transform the cultures of our local churches and our communities so that they become places where people say, you know what happened? I sat down with someone who was from a different faith, and there was no talk about our religious backgrounds and what needed to happen. We simply met one another as people. There's nothing.
You actually gave her your ketchup, didn't you?
Yeah, that really was a true story. Yeah, I'm in an airport and I sit down to eat a hamburger from Wendy's, and I'm at a 2-seater table in this very large food court with other open tables, and a Muslim woman looks me in the eye and says, "May I sit there?" Now, folks, I had a choice in that moment. I could have said no. One, that would have been rude. There's no reason to say no. And I said yes. And, what do you do when someone who quite literally is a stranger sits down across the table from you? It's kind of weird. I'll just name it. And I noticed that she was fumbling through her bag. And to me, what I was guessing she was doing was looking for ketchup, because she had French fries and she wasn't finding any ketchup. Well, they had given me like 6 packs of ketchup. And so I look at her and I said, "Do you need ketchup?" I said, "They gave me 6 packs and I don't even eat it." And she laughed and she said, "Yes, thank you." And that started a conversation. And we sat there and she ate her French fries and I ate my burger. And we had conversation about where we had both been. And she had been with her family at a wedding in Atlanta. And I was telling her about being in Texas. And the whole time I'm thinking, God, you send your messengers in very strange ways sometimes. I don't know that I have ever had someone ask me, "Can I sit at a table with you?" who's a complete stranger. Maybe if we're at the same event, you might say, "Is this seat open?" And you might not know the people that you're sitting with, but we were in an airport. Come to find out, we were both on the same flight, and she lives in the same community that I live in. It's not rocket science. So what would have happened if I looked at her and, because I knew immediately because of what she was wearing, she was a Muslim woman, I said, "No, you can't sit here." I would have missed an encounter with God. And so for those of you that want to write me hate email that I'm saying that I encountered God in a Muslim woman, yes, I did.
What I'm hearing you say is that we need to learn a new way. And you and I didn't talk about this, but part of what you've done in terms of your ministry, in terms of the work that you do, you are learning new ways to help us as leaders lead in a different way.
Yeah, and once again, here was just going back to that conversation, what happens? You meet someone and she says, "So what do you do for a living?" Here we go again. I said this in the last episode. This was, if I could put a banner over this trip for me, it was, "Yes, Sarah, you are a pastor." And I need to say to her, I'm a pastor. And her response is, "In the Christian church?" "Yes." And, "Oh, do you travel a lot?" And I said, "No, there's 119, 120 churches that the area that I focus on." And she said, "Well, you've got to travel if that's the case." And then she caught herself and she said, "Wait, are you United Methodist?" Because by that point, she already knew where I lived. I think there's a piece of it, Tim, that simply comes from, I could have chosen to go eat my hamburger sitting over at the gate in a corner by myself. The choices that we make and the places that we put ourselves and how we respond by the grace of God to what is happening in our midst. All of this for me of choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, and easy. When I think about the life of the church, and we've made the conversation around human sexuality, for me, it goes way deeper than one single part of our book of discipline. It goes to the core of how are we embodying the love of God that we know in Jesus? And how are we leading people into a relationship with Christ? Because what I've witnessed is people treating one another with hatred, being nasty to one another, and being petty with one another. And that's not the church. It's certainly not the love of God. And if I'm really honest, and at some point Tim's going to say, "Stop, Sarah, we're not talking about this anymore." I've come to realize that there's an awful lot that goes on in our denomination that masquerades as leadership, and it's really rooted in shame. And that's not okay either. It's not overt shame. We're too nice for that. We put a wrapper around it and we label it things and we call it, well, that's the system and that's how the system works. And, one of those systems is an electronic system that is broken at best. And so we blame the person instead of going back and saying, something in the system needs to change. What do we need to do so that we don't have people that are encountering this over and over and over again? So that we're not blaming the person, but we're helping the people who are responsible for leading the system to develop the steps and a process that is functional and effective. So what I'm saying is when there are problems, we don't blame people. We ask, what is the problem here that we need to address, and how do we work through that together? Again, it's courage. But often what I see happening is we don't choose the right, you can't see my air quotes, the right thing, and having those conversations, we continue to blame people. No, you can't come for this interview. Or we say to pastors, you need to come back next year. You're not ready. And there's nothing more that is said. It's just, you're not ready. Or we see your history and you're a risk. We're going to have to keep a close eye on you. Or I see you have an issue with authority and it's nothing more than you spoke your mind. And that's all shame. It's shame and blame.
How can we have this conversation in a way that's going to make a difference? You're bringing to us some things. So what is it? I mean, Sarah, when we shame people, one of the things that I've learned from you, and I keep learning in the church, and the very things that we do, is being able to let people know that they're loved by God, they're God's children. How do we get back to that point? And I know what we're talking is that we're going to have to learn a new way of leading, and we're going to have to be courageous in the midst of this leading. We're going to have to step out of our comfort zones and be brave at offering a new way to get back to the place of what we've been talking about over the last several weeks, back to kingdom leadership, or back to a place where we are including people and not excluding. Even in all the ways that we talk about within the institution of including, we've become exclusive.
I hope what folks are hearing is that I'm making observations. The reality is, folks, we're all a part of this. And so the question that I'm asking myself is, what is my part? And how can I, this is to answer your question of how can we have a conversation that it makes a difference, it leads to something new. I think it begins with each one of us, of asking ourselves the hard questions and having these conversations with people that we can lean into being vulnerable with and say, I don't have this all figured out, but I want to try. I want to step into it. And I want to learn something new, because what I've experienced is this isn't working. And we need something new. And I want to be able to help people when the thought bubbles pop up and they've gone into a shame storm, or they've been blamed for something that isn't their fault. It's a function of the system that they're a part of. And they start saying to themselves, I'm not good enough, and who do I think I am? Those ridiculous statements that we've all said, and we will say again, that they have the capacity to say, I know what's happening here. And I just need to stop. And I need to take a step back. And I need to pick up the phone. And I need to call one of the people that I know I can have this conversation with and say, this is what just happened. And I'm in a full-on shame storm, thinking that I am no good. I can't be a pastor. There's no place for me. Who do I think I am? I can't do anything right. So that they can say, you know what? That really sucks. And I can't fix it for you. But what do you think your next step is? Maybe it's going back to that person and saying, you know, can we have a conversation? Because when you said to me, you have authority issues, there was nothing around that. You made a grand statement. And I'm sure that there's a reason for that statement. But here's what happened to me. I started thinking, who the heck are you? I started wondering, do I have authority issues? I started thinking, did I say something that I don't know what did I say something inappropriate to someone at some point in time? I need you to help me understand. Because if I am coming off too strong, that's not how I want to be perceived. So will you help me to learn a different way? That's making it right. The fun, fast, and easy way would be to pick up the phone to that same person and say, I need to tell you. Now, Tim and I have never had that conversation that I just pretended about. But, I need to tell you about Tim Bias. And this is what he said to me. Isn't he a horrible and awful person for saying something like that to me? And I make the other person into the devil because it's fun, fast, and easy. It's easy to make someone else the target and scapegoat to someone else. It's harder to take responsibility for how we're feeling and what we're thinking and recognizing that something needs to change in the midst of that. And so circling back and having a conversation with someone that you simply say, I need to understand this differently because this is what has happened.
So part of the leadership that you're talking about is, it's too simplistic for me to say it this way, but this is really what we're talking about, and that is we're taking relationships seriously.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what you were pointing out of how do we get back to helping people understand that they are beloved children of God. If we can be in relationship with one another and have those conversations that, they might be hard and they might be awkward, but we'll end up in a new place together versus fighting against one another. That's transformational, folks. It's also called leadership. And so we have to learn to model that for the folks that we are leading. And when I say leading, I'm not just saying the pastor. Because I know that there are people that listen to this podcast who are leading in schools and are leading in business and are leading in their home and are leading in their neighborhoods.
So what we're holding important then, what becomes the value, which is, I would agree, is the person and the relationship we have with one another. It's not the system. We can change the system. The system's made up of people, but when we focus upon the technical pieces of a system, people become expenditures.
Right. And so when go back to our episodes on growing in grace, is that something that we profess or is that something that we believe? We're going to get to that in the next episode. I believe that God's not finished with any of us. I believe that we're all growing in grace. And if I get a self-righteous attitude and opinion, or if you get a self-righteous attitude or opinion, it's just that. It's self-righteous and it's opinionated. And neither one of those are things of God. And that's all focused on the system. So do you see the person who is sitting across from you as a person? Or are they one more widget that's a part of the institution?
That's a different way of leading, and that's what we're talking about today. And you wouldn't say this about yourself, but you have been certified as a leader within the Brene Brown organization, which helps grow leaders in different ways, shaping leaders in different ways for the time in which we live. Will you say something about that?
So I have been certified as a Dare to Lead facilitator. And so what that means is I am certified to facilitate Brene Brown's research and her work. Those 100 people that were in that room that you've heard me talk about for the past couple of episodes, what we held in common is that we were all vetted through a process to look at what our background and our training and our skills and our experience and the oversight that we have to be able to do this work. And so this work is happening in all of the places that I've mentioned. It's happening in the military. It's happening in businesses like Nike and IKEA. It's happening in schools and institutions of higher education. And what I love about what I have the privilege of being able to offer is that in the church, all of those people exist.
So, friends, do you want to learn more about leading with courage? This episode is brought to you by Dare to Lead, a workshop based on the research of Brene Brown, and to help you learn the skills you need to be a brave leader and create a courageous culture. You can let us know that you're interested by clicking on the button on the show notes page, transformingmission.org/075.
And let me also remind you that if you have not already signed up to be a LeaderCast Insider, we send out an email every Tuesday morning letting you know when a new episode of LeaderCast is live and also providing you with links to any of the downloadable resources from that episode. You can also subscribe to LeaderCast in your favorite podcast player on your Android or Apple device.
Well, as a reminder, Transforming Mission exists to help you transform your relationship with Christ, your congregation, and your local community.
So go lead a movement of Jesus followers. Do what's right over what's fast, fun, and easy. Bye for now.